20 years of silence ended with a phone call. Arthur? My son's voice came through strange, as if spoken by a stranger. I'm getting married. Eleanor wants you to be there. A foolish flicker of hope sparked inside me. Why? To make a joke of you, he said, his voice ice cold. She says every wedding needs a comic tragedy to keep people talking. You, the failed carpenter, will come and bless the empire you lost. It'll be the perfect show. You'll be the joke of the evening. He hung up. I looked down at my calloused hands. Once they drew plans for buildings, now they would draft a ruin. They want a performance? I'll give them a performance they'll never forget. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? The air in Arthur Pendleton's workshop carried the clean, honest scent of cedar and things made by hand. It was an old-world smell, the smell of real things fashioned from other real things. Outside, the world rumbled on with engines, horns, and empty promises. But here, in the battered shed he called his kingdom, the only sound was the steady rasp of a plank on oak, a conversation older than words. He ran his thumb over a dovetail joint he'd just smoothed. It felt finer than any lie he'd ever heard. On his workbench sat his latest piece, a baby cradle of honey-colored cherry. Its curves were soft and gentle, an absolute counterpoint to the man shaping it. Arthur, at 62, looked like he'd been carved from the same stubborn hardwood. He worked with broad shoulders, thick hands, a quiet solidity wrapped around him like bark. The cradle was nearly finished. It was a special thing, made not because anyone had paid for it, but because he simply wanted to make it. Sometimes he did that. He made a chair for someone to sit and think in, a box for someone to keep secrets, a cradle for a new beginning. Small luxuries earned by 2 decades of solitary labor. Then the phone rang. A harsh, incongruous sound tore the piece in two. The black landline on the dusty table in the corner, a scar of plastic from an earlier life, screeched to life. It was the one relic he had kept from his old world. The only thing that could still call him back into it. Why he kept it? He asked himself 1,000 times. Maybe in some ashamed corner of his heart. It was a foolish hope that one day it would ring for a reason other than rancor. Today, that hope died. On the third ring, he put his plane down carefully, blade up, wiped his hands on the worn leather apron, and moved with deliberate, unhurried gestures. He stared at the receiver like it was a coiled snake, ready to strike. He knew who it would be. Only one person in the world still had that number. He lifted the handset. Hello? His voice was hoarse from disuse. Silence. Then a voice on the line, slick and hollow like cheap veneer over chipboard. It was his son's voice, and yet it sounded like a stranger speaking his name. Arthur? Not dad, not father, just Arthur, as though they were in the boardroom. Damien, Arthur answered, voice flat. Oh, you recognize me, Damien said, with a practiced surprise. I wanted to let you know. I'm getting married. Arthur said nothing. He listened to the wind moving through the workshop, a truer sound than the voice on the line. The wedding's next month, Damien went on, the awkwardness in his tone growing. At the Epsilon KC Omicron Chi Iota Kappa Club. It'll be a big event. Maybe offer longer. Arthur could picture it. Damien in some expensive apartment pacing on hardwood, coached by Eleanor and Marcus for this call. The invitation was not an olive branch. It was a polished stone to hurl. They weren't inviting him, they were issuing a summons. They wanted him paraded out like an exhibit. Arthur, the failure. The father who'd been to prison, who lost everything, now reduced to a small, dusty life. They wanted to show him off to their rich friends, a living cautionary tale that made their own success and magnanimity shine brighter. See how charitable we are, we even invited the poor old man. Arthur didn't answer at once. He looked at his hands, at the map of scars and calluses, at the stories 20 years had etched into his skin. Each scar was a lesson, each plain mark an oath. These hands had once drafted buildings that reached for the sky. Now they knew the truth of wood and of steel things that did not lie. Finally, with a calm, even voice, as level as a finished tabletop, he said. I will come. Silence on the other end uncoiled into something else. Confusion. It was not what they rehearsed for. They expected anger, bitterness, perhaps a small self-righteous refusal. They did not expect this quiet acceptance. Oh, Damien stammered. Good, good. I'll send an invitation. No need, Arthur said. I know where it is. I know even. He hung up before Damien could answer. The workshop's hush settled back around him, but it was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. He turned back to his bench and looked at the half-finished cherry cradle, a work of beginnings and hope. His hand gripped the cradle's rail. His knuckles went white. For a heartbeat, the pressure threatened to split the delicate grain. Then he relaxed. He picked up a chisel not in anger but with a crystalline clarity of purpose. The wood curled away from the blade in a perfect ribbon. Silently, the stage had been set, the playhouse erected. But they had made a grave mistake. They thought they'd invited a ghost from the past. They had not realized they just summoned a woodworker to the day of reckoning. To understand why my son's voice sounded like a stranger's, you have to come back with me to the time when the lies were only hairline cracks in the foundation of my life. 20 years ago, I wasn't a retired woodworker. I was Arthur Pendleton of Pendleton and Croft Architects. I shaped skylines. Our firm was built on my drawings and Marcus Croft's handshakes. We began in a rented office above a laundromat with 2 drafting tables and a shared dream. I was the soul of the work, the one who turned lines on paper into real spaces. Marcus handled the numbers and handshakes. He had $1 million smile and the talent for turning the most difficult prospects into friends. For 30 years, we were a perfect machine. I trusted him. I trusted him like you trust the laws of physics, like you trust the strength of a steel beam. That was the greatest mistake of my life, trusting a friend. Looking back now, the cracks had always been there. I was just too busy building other things to notice. I remember dinners at the Epsilon KC Omicron Chi Iota Kappa O Club, where my wife Eleanor shone. She loved that world, the polished conversations, the label dresses. I did not. I was more comfortable with the smell of tracing paper and ink. I remember once Marcus showing off a new Patek Philippe. Eleanor admired it, the tips of her fingers tracing the sapphire crystal longer than was necessary. You deserve it, Marcus, she said, eyes bright. Not like some people who only bury their heads in drawings. At the time, I took it as harmless teasing, part of her usual chorus about how I was impractical. Now I see it for what it was, a comparison, a judgment. Marcus laughed, that too bright laugh. Arthur's an artist, Eleanor, he said, clapping me on the back. That clap, now I know, felt less like camaraderie and more like someone testing the sturdiness of my spine before planning to break it. The trap was set around our biggest project, the Oak Ridge Community Center. It was my pride, an ambitious design of glass, steel, and timber, a place for everyone. I poured myself into those plans. Sleepless nights spent perfecting details. Marcus took care of the rest. Leave the dull stuff to me, he'd say. You just keep dreaming up beautiful buildings. So I did. I handed him full authority over subcontractors, suppliers, the numbers in the spreadsheets. I never checked. Why should I? He was Marcus. Then, one hot June day, the trap fell. I was in the office when the call came. Part of the steel roof at the Oak Ridge site collapsed during installation. No one died, thank God, but several men were badly hurt. Within hours, our office turned into a crisis command center, investigators, engineers, lawyers. Marcus looked devastated, pale and shaken. He kept saying, "How could this happen, Arthur? We used the best materials." The answer arrived 2 days later. An independent structural engineer found the problem. The installed steel beams did not meet specifications. They were cheaper, weaker, supplied by a subcontractor whose name was unfamiliar to me. When Marcus handed me the paperwork, my blood ran cold. The purchase orders, the invoices, everything was there, and at the bottom of each page, in ink I knew, was my signature. A perfect forgery. "I don't understand," I stammered, staring at the familiar lines of ink that looked suddenly alien. "Christ, Arthur," Marcus said, clenching his head. "What have you done?" That evening, I drove home in a daze. I needed Eleanor's counsel. She was a practical one. She would know what to do. When I walked in, There was a hush. Damien, then 7, was at his grandparents'. I went into the kitchen and my world ended. They weren't arguing. They weren't frantic. They were standing there, a portrait of composed collusion. Marcus leaned against the counter. Eleanor stirred a gin and tonic, eyes clinking softly. She wore a silk dress, as if preparing for a party, rather than facing the collapse of her life. She looked up at me with no surprise, no alarm, only a cold kind of pity. "Arthur," she said evenly. I turned to Marcus, my heart hammering. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" He shrugged, a small, impossibly cruel gesture. There was no remorse left in him. "You should have paid more attention, Arthur," he said. His voice lost whatever warmth had once been there and took on the metallic chill of a machine. "This is business. Business." He called betrayal of a 30-year friendship business. He called the ruin of my reputation, the theft of my company, business. I looked at Eleanor, my wife, the mother of my son, and the truth hit me. This wasn't only Marcus's plan. It was hers too. The foundation of my life hadn't merely cracked. It had been laid on deceit from the start. And now it was collapsing, burying me beneath it. The next day they came for me. Not at home, in some private corner. They came to the office. 2 uniformed officers, calm and professional, walked in while everyone was still working. Phones went silent. The tapping of keyboards stopped. I was standing by the young secretary Beth's desk, looking over a drawing. When the cold steel of the handcuffs closed around my wrists, I saw Marcus. He was standing in the conference room doorway, his face contorted into an expression of grief. He laid a comforting hand on the shoulder of a sobbing junior architect, a perfect performance for the public eye. He was not only the reluctant accuser, he was the magnanimous father tending his fractured family. I fell the stairs. They weren't seeing a betrayed man. They saw a fraud who had betrayed their trust, the community's trust. Eleanor and Marcus had painted a picture, and they were happy to believe it. As they led me through the main lobby, I caught my reflection in the glass. A man in a rumpled suit, hair disheveled, hands cuffed behind him. A criminal. The trial was a theater, and I was cast as the villain in a play I had never rehearsed. Marcus, the financial manager, had spent months manufacturing a flawless paper trail. Every trace led to an overseas account under a name almost like mine. My court-appointed lawyer, a tired-looking man, tried his best, but he felt like he was punching a concrete wall built with my own money. Every rustle of paperwork, every cough from the gallery landed like a verdict. But the star of the show was Eleanor. She mounted the witness stand in a simple black street. John dressed an image of solemn dignity and wounded faith. She would not look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the jury, filled with sorrow and noble reluctance. "Mrs. Pendleton," Marcus's attorney began softly. "Did you notice any unusual behavior of your husband's finances in recent months?" Eleanor drew a trembling breath. "Arthur has always been private," she whispered. "He called it the privacy of the artist. I trusted him." But then there were late-night calls. Sudden business trips he couldn't explain. He grew distant. It was masterful manipulation. She took my devotion to my work and turned it into evidence of a double life. She didn't merely lie, she performed an autopsy of our marriage for an enraptured crowd. And when you asked him about these things, a single tear slid down her cheek, exquisitely timed. He brushed me off. He told me I wouldn't understand that it was work pressure. She lifted a handkerchief to her eyes. Now I know where that pressure came from. When she finished, an awkward hush filled the courtroom. Not the hush of sympathy for me, but the hushed silence of an audience utterly convinced. They had their villain. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. 5 years in prison. Damages would be taken from whatever remained of my stake in the firm. The final blow came in a separate family court hearing soon after. Eleanor, with eyes still rimmed in red, made a compelling case that she was the stable parent. The court awards sole custody of Damien Pendleton to the mother, Mrs. Eleanor Pendleton, the judge declared. The father's living situation is unstable and would be detrimental to the child's development. I heard nothing after that. Sound drained away until all I had was a roaring in my ears. They had taken more than my freedom. They had taken my son. The last time I saw him, it was in a small, sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. He sat across from me, glass between us, his face an unreadable knot of confusion and fear. He wore the blue sweater I had bought him. He looked up. The face of my boy was a mess of bafflement and worry. He lifted the heavy receiver. "Dad," he whispered, voice breaking. "Grandma says you did something very bad. Is that true?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. What could I say? That his mother and my closest friend had ruined my life? That the world runs on lies? How do you explain that to a 7-year-old? "Am I a bad person?" he asked again, eyes wet. The question hung there like the final blow unanswerable. Then the door behind him opened. Eleanor walked in, her face the flawless mask of proper concern. She put a gentle hand on Damien's shoulder. "It's time, sweetheart." As Damien rose, I saw Marcus appear at the doorway. He did not enter. He simply stood and watched. When Eleanor let Damien through, Marcus crouched to be level with my son. He smiled a warm, reassuring smile, the sort of smile that fits perfectly into a photograph. "Don't worry, kiddo," he called, loud enough that I heard through the glass. "From now on, I will take care of the two of you." He laid a possessive hand on my son's shoulder. He was taking more than my firm, more than my wife. He was taking my name from my son's mouth. He was erasing me. And as they turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my reflection in the glass, I understood the new rule. Silence had begun. Words no longer held power. Truth had been buried. From that moment on, only action could speak. State prison is another world, governed by a different set of physical laws. Here, silence is armor, invisibility, a survival skill. I, Arthur Pendleton, architect of skylines, learned to stoop, keep my eyes down, become a ghost in concrete corridors. The yard was a symphony of chaos and whispered threats. Each day was a test in how to exist without being seen. The rage never left me, a coal smoldering in my chest. Nights I lay on the hard slab of a bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus and Eleanor's faces, until my hatred burnt so hot I thought it would consume me. I knew I had two choices: let it swallow me, or find somewhere to channel it. My escape arrived as an old corrugated metal building in a remote corner of the compound, the wood shop, a veteran vocational program kept alive mostly for one man named Silas. He'd been there 40 years, serving a life sentence for a crime no one quite remembered, and the shop was his kingdom. The administration left him alone because he kept himself and a handful of other inmates out of trouble. The wood shop was a church. The scent of pine and linseed oil was incense. Dusty light through grimy panes felt like stained glass. The first time I stepped in, I felt a peace I'd not known in years. Silas was small, his skin wrinkled like a dried apple, but his hands were large and strong. He didn't say much. The first time I asked for work, he only glanced at my soft architect's hands and snorted, "This ain't the place for dreamers." I persisted. For a month, my job was sweeping sawdust and sorting tools. I did it without complaint. I watched Silas work, how he read the grain like a book, how the plane's blade peeled ribbons of wood. There was an honesty to his craft, a relentless precision I'd no longer seen in my world. Finally, one morning he pointed at a pile of scrap. "Take one," he ordered. Then he handed me a chisel and a mallet. "Make it flat." It was my test. I failed spectacularly. In that first year, everything I tried ended in a pile of ruined wood. My anger, my impatience, my bitterness each showed up in ragged cuts and split grain. I tried to coerce the timber to do my bidding the same way I'd once coerced lines on a drawing. But wood is different. Wood has life. It has its own will. Silas watched my miserable attempts and said, "The wood's telling me you ain't ready to listen." One afternoon, after I ruined the precious oak blank, I flung the chisel down in a rage. Silas picked it up and tapped a warped board with his knuckle. "Wood don't lie, son," he said, voice steady. "You can't sweet-talk it. You can't bully it. You've got to understand it. Respect its truth. Whatever you make good or bad shows on it. No room here for pretty drawings or pretty promises. Outside world, full of liars. In here, only the wood's honest." That line changed everything. I realized I dragged the outside world's deceit into this sanctuary. I was trying to force my fury into the wood, and the wood refused. From then on, I learned to listen. I let the tools become extensions of my hands. I let my rage run through me and into the plane, turning to harmless curls of shavings on the floor. Every true cut was a small victory over chaos. Every tight joint a declaration of order. Years passed. My hands thickened and toughened. I learned to tell pine from walnut by touch alone. I could cut a dovetail so seamless it read as a single line. The day I planed a board perfectly flat, I felt a peace I hadn't known for a long time. It was not forgiveness, it was a deep contentment. I'd made a small, perfect truth in a world of lies. Before I was released, I spent weeks on one last piece, a small box of maple, pale, and fine-grained. I sanded it until it was silky. Its corners were crisp and exact, simple, perfect. On the underside, where no one would look, I carefully carved 3 letters, D.A.P. Damien Arthur Pendleton. It wasn't a gift I could mail. I knew I couldn't. It was a promise to myself that someday I'd build something for my son that was honest and whole, like this polished maple. I had lost the architect's legacy. I'd once held drawings and pledges that had been built on lies. Now I would build a new legacy, out of wood, out of steel, and out of the unarguable truth of my own hands. State prison is another world, governed by a different set of physical laws. Here, silence is armor, invisibility, a survival skill. I, Arthur Pendleton, architect of skylines, learned to stoop, keep my eyes down, become a ghost in concrete corridors. The yard was a symphony of chaos and whispered threats. Each day was a test in how to exist without being seen. The rage never left me a coal smoldering in my chest. Nights I lay on the hard slab of a bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus and Eleanor's faces until my hatred burned so hot I thought it would consume me. I knew I had 2 choices: let it swallow me, or find somewhere to channel it. My escape arrived as an old, corrugated metal building in a remote corner of the compound. The wood shop, a veteran vocational program kept alive mostly for one man named Silas. He'd been there 40 years, serving a life sentence for a crime no one quite remembered, and the shop was his kingdom. The administration left him alone because he kept himself and a handful of other inmates out of trouble. The wood shop was a church. The scent of pine and linseed oil was incense. Dusty light through grimy panes felt like stained glass. The first time I stepped in, I felt a peace I'd not known in years. Silas was small, his skin wrinkled like a dried apple, but his hands were large and strong. He didn't say much. The first time I asked for work, he only glanced at my soft architect's hands and snorted. "This ain't a place for dreamers." I persisted. For a month, my job was sweeping sawdust and sorting tools. I did it without complaint. I watched Silas work, how he read the grain like a book, how the plane's blade peeled ribbons of wood. There was an honesty to his craft, a relentless precision I'd no longer seen in my world. Finally, one morning he pointed at a pile of scrap. "Take one," he ordered. Then he handed me a chisel and a mallet. "Make it flat." It was my test. I failed spectacularly. In that first year, everything I tried ended in a pile of ruined wood. My anger, my impatience, my bitterness each showed up in ragged cuts and split grain. I tried to coerce the timber to do my bidding, the same way I'd once coerced lines on a drawing. But wood is different. Wood has life. It has its own will. Silas watched my miserable attempts and said, "The wood's telling me you ain't ready to listen." One afternoon, after I'd ruined a precious oak blank, I flung the chisel down in a rage. Silas picked it up and tapped a warped board with his knuckle. "Wood don't lie, son," he said, voice steady. "You can't sweet-talk it. You can't bully it. You've got to understand it, respect its truth. Whatever you make good or bad shows on it. No room here for pretty drawings or pretty promises. Outside world, full of liars. In here, only the wood's honest." That line changed everything. I realized I dragged the outside world's deceit into this sanctuary. I was trying to force my fury into the wood, and the wood refused. From then on, I learned to listen. I let the tools become extensions of my hands. I let my rage run through me and into the plane, turn to harmless curls of shavings on the floor. Every true cut was a small victory over chaos. Every tight joint a declaration of order. Years passed. My hands thickened and toughened. I learned to tell pine from walnut by touch alone. I could cut a dovetail so seamless it read as a single line. The day I planed the board perfectly flat, I felt a peace I hadn't known for a long time. It was not forgiveness. It was a deep contentment. I'd made a small, perfect truth in the world of lies. Before I was released, I spent weeks on one last piece. A small box of maple, pale and fine-grained. I sanded it until it was silky. Its corners were crisp and exact. Simple, perfect. On the underside, where no one would look, I carefully carved 3 letters. D-A-P. Damien Arthur Pendleton. It wasn't a gift I could mail. I knew I couldn't. It was a promise. A promise to myself that someday I'd build something for my son that was honest and whole. Like this polished maple. I had lost the architect's legacy. I'd once held drawings and pledges that had been built on lies. Now I would build a new legacy. Out of wood, out of steel, and out of the unarguable truth of my own hands. Years passed. The rented garage gave way to a real wood shop, a reclaimed brick building I rebuilt myself. I no longer fixed wobbly chairs for spare change. I kept a year-long waiting list and only took on jobs that interested me, projects with a story behind them. In this world, people don't ask for my real name. They call me the craftsman. The name is enough. It's a pledge about quality, not a resume. It's the rampart I hide behind. Eleanor and Marcus's life leaked to me only in the occasional society page headline. I skimmed over my coffee. Eleanor Croft honored for charitable contributions. Marcus Croft unveils new Riverside complex. They done well. Our old firm now, Croft Designs, had become an empire. They lived among polished surfaces and photographed smiles in a world utterly foreign to me. For a long time, I thought those two worlds would never meet again. I was wrong. It started with an email. It came from a young interior designer named Vanessa King. She'd seen an oak dining table I'd made years ago at a client's house and was, in her words, enchanted. Her note was enthusiastic and respectful, full of talk about the honesty of the work and the soul of the material. She had a special request, a personal commission. We exchanged a few emails. She was sharp and had a good eye. I agreed to meet. The last message before our appointment arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was checking the balance of a rocking chair when the old shop computer pinged. I wiped my hands and opened it. Dear Mr. Craftsman, I'm so excited for our meeting tomorrow. A little context. This will be my wedding gift to my fiancé, and I hope it will become an heirloom. His family cares deeply about image and legacy, so everything must be perfect. I believe you are the only person who can do this. Sincerely, Vanessa King, P.S. I can't wait to see Damien's reaction when he opens it. He is Damien Pendleton. I read the last line twice. Damien Pendleton. The name sat on the screen, cold and sharp. 20 years of silence crashed down in a single instant. The quiet in my shop became thick, heavy. The hum of the fluorescent light above me sounded like a scream. I put my hand on the oak bench, felt the steadiness of the wood beneath my palm, and fought not to stagger. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. I didn't reply right away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark shop and looked at the tools on the wall, each one a testament to my new life. For years, I told myself the best revenge was living well, building things honest and lasting from the ashes. But now the past didn't just knock. It hired a designer to come in and make the place pretty. Vanessa wanted a memory box in walnut. Something large enough to hold a couple's most treasured keepsakes, she'd written. A masterpiece. A legacy. A legacy. I went to the steel cabinet in the corner and pulled out my leather-bound ledger. I flipped through sketches, notes on species of wood, the names of the clients who trusted me. That was my legacy built on truth. Then I knew what I had to do. This wasn't coincidence. It was an opportunity one handed to me by the very people who'd taken everything. They were paying me to make the instrument that would expose them. The irony nearly made me laugh. The next morning, I sat down and wrote a short reply. Miss King, I have reviewed your request. I will take the commission. I paused, fingers hovering. Then I added one final line. But a piece like this must tell a story. I will make it, and it will tell the story of the truth. I hit send. Her answer came within hours, bright, trusting. Wonderful. I completely trust your vision. A story about truth sounds perfect. She didn't get it. Not yet. But she would, they would. I went back to my bench with a cold, steady calm. I was no longer only a craftsman reacting to the grain in front of me. I was an architect again, only this time I was designing a collapse. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you and where are you listening? The work did not begin with the whine of a saw so much as with silence. I spent a week simply staring at the slab of black walnut I'd chosen. It was an old board, rescued from a collapsing warehouse. Its grain tangled and knotted in complicated spirals. It looked like alive to me, full of knots and surprise veining, hidden beauty and flaws. It was perfect for what I intended. For the next 3 months, my shop became a shrine, a surgical theater. Everything else was set aside. The memory box became my only obsession. It was where the two halves of me, the architect and the woodworker, finally met. The architect designed the collapse, the woodworker executed it with a ruthless exactitude. On the outside, the box was a statement of permanence. I carved an image of an ancient oak on the lid, its roots gripping the earth, its branches sheltering. It was the emblem of family, legacy, steadiness. The irony of it nearly made me smile as I worked. I spent weeks refining every leaf, every fissure in the bark. To the world, it would be the Pendleton Croft family emblem. To me, it was their tombstone. But the true beauty, or more honestly, the danger lay within. The architect in me had designed a complicated mechanism, a secret hidden away. Beneath a lining of deep crimson velvet at the bottom of the box sat a false floor. It couldn't be pried open. It had no hinge. It would only reveal itself to a precise sequence. Around the carved oak on the lid, I inlaid 4 small sterling silver animals, an owl, a fox, a bear, and a stag. They read as ornament. They were not. They were the keys. Turn the owl a quarter turn left, turn the bear a half turn right, press the fox's head down. A soft click, and the false floor would pop free, a small motion designed to produce a large consequence. Inside that hidden compartment, I placed a real legacy. In the chaotic days after I was taken before they sealed everything up, I had managed to copy the office hard drive onto a tiny USB. I had carried it for 20 years, a time capsule full of poison. On it were recovered emails between Eleanor and Marcus discussing how to take care of Arthur and how to shape the narrative for the press. Beside the USB, I placed a professionally photographed and reprinted packet of the original financial documents, invoices, and orders that showed Marcus's genuine signature on purchases of inferior materials from a shell company he had set up. Clear, incontrovertible proof. And lastly, the crucial piece, an old, softened photograph, its corners worn by time. It was a cruel providence. A fellow architect, unaware of what had happened to me, had sent it months after I went away with a note. Arthur, I thought I saw your wife at the breakers. She looked very happy. In the picture, Eleanor laughs, a champagne flute in hand. Standing beside her, arm casually around her waist, is Marcus. The photo was stamped with a date. 1 week before the roof fell, I placed those 3 items into the secret cavity. They lay there, silent and terrible. I felt a strange calm. The fury was gone. Only the focused calm of a craftsman completing the most important job of his life remained. I was turning the chaos of the past into a tidy, graspable order. I snapped the false bottom back into place. The click when it seated felt satisfying. I smoothed the velvet over it, hiding every seam. Before closing the lid for the last time, I set a small scrap of vellum atop the lining. With a fountain pen, I wrote a single line, the mantra that had saved me in my darkest years. Wood does not lie. I finished the box. I rubbed it with beeswax until the walnut gleamed with a deep, warm light. It was a perfect object. Beautiful, finished, lethal in its intent. A finely crafted tomb, waiting to be opened. The day Vanessa King came to collect the box, I had cleaned the shop more thoroughly than usual. I swept every curl of sawdust, organized my tools, and set the box on the old velvet cloth on the main workbench. Afternoon light slanted through the windows and picked out the walnut's deep grain. She arrived on time, driving a small, wide Audi that looked entirely out of place on the gravel road through the industrial park. When she stepped inside, she hesitated for a moment, blinking to adjust to the dim, wood-scented air. This place heavy with oil and sawdust was a long way from the perfume and money of her world. "Mr. Craftsman," she called, a touch uncertain. I stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Miss King." She smiled, an honest brightness that lit her face. She was young, half my age, maybe, and full of that clean, eager energy. When I looked at her, I caught a flash of the man I used to be, someone who believed in the beauty of design, in the honesty of a line. Her gaze then fell on the box. She approached it almost reverently. "Oh," she whispered. One word. She didn't touch it at first. She circled it, admiring it from every angle. Finally, she laid her long, careful fingers on the lid and let them follow the carved oak. "It's more than I imagined," she said, eyes fixed on the work. It has a soul." "Ben, in the nether is not for..." I said nothing. I let the silence and the object speak. "That must have taken forever," she said at last, looking up at me with genuine admiration. 20 years, I replied. She laughed a little, clear sound. "You are kidding." "I'm not," I said, steady and low. Her laugh died. She searched my face, trying to read whatever weight or sadness lived there and couldn't name it. A flicker of confusion crossed her features. Then she forced a smile, perhaps assuming it was just the eccentricity of an old artist. "Wow," she said, "it's really a masterpiece. Damien will be stunned." She produced a thick envelope from her bag and set it on the bench, the final payment, enough to keep me for half a year. At that moment, money felt oddly unimportant. As I carefully placed the box into a padded crate for transport, an unexpected kinship with this young woman touched me. She was good, someone who valued beauty and truth. She was about to walk into a house built on lies and did not know it. My purpose sharpened. This was not merely revenge. This was rescue. I closed the crate and looked at her. "A beautiful box belongs in an honest home," I said, voice low but clear. "Make sure you have one, Miss King." The words hung in the sawdust-thick air. She paused. The smile on her lips froze for a beat. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to link that odd sentence with the 20 years I said earlier. "Of course," she replied, voice a little tight. Thank you. Thank you for everything." I helped her carry the crate to her car. When she slid behind the wheel and started the engine, she rolled down the window. "Mr. Craftsman," she said, "there's a sadness in your eyes. I hope you find some peace someday." Then she drove away, leaving me standing in a small cloud of dust. I watched the white Audi until it vanished down the road. There was no exultation, no sense of triumph. Only a deep sorrow, the sorrow of a father who knows that, to build an honest future for one person, he must destroy the world of another. The Trojan horse was already inside the walls. All that remained was to wait for the wedding. The night before my son's wedding, I did not toss or turn. Sleep came steady and deep, like the hush inside an old oak. I woke before dawn the next morning, as I always do. There was no anxiety, no hesitation, only the cold clarity of purpose. I did not put on a rented suit or pretend to be a man I have long ceased to be. Instead, I chose my cleanest work clothes, a faded blue chambray shirt pressed and a pair of dark, sturdy denim jeans. This is my uniform. This is who I am. Instead of a tie, I slipped a few things into the inside pocket of my wool jacket. A small brass tape measure, burnished bright, a carpenter's pencil flat and dependable, and my leather ledger, now grown thick. This was my armor. This was the record of my new legacy. 20 miles away, in a villa overlooking the Exochico Club golf course, Vanessa King was not at peace. The carpenter's words kept returning to her 20 years. An honest home. They were shards of glass in her mind, sharp and disquieting. That evening, at the intimate rehearsal dinner, she watched the family she was about to join. Everything was perfect too, perfect. Marcus's laugh just a little too loud, a little too bright, like someone trying to mask a deep crack in a foundation. The way Eleanor touched her husband's arm was more possessive than affectionate. They were a power couple, polished, posed, carefully photographed. And yet, if you look closely, Vanessa could see tiny scratches beneath the lacquer. She sat beside Damien, holding his hand. He seemed tight, constantly glancing at Marcus as if seeking approval. He was a good man, she told herself, kind, generous, but beside his stepfather he looked diminished. The seed of real doubt sprouted from a careless remark. Aunt Mildred, after her third glass of champagne, lapsed into nostalgia and clapped Marcus on the hand loudly enough for Vanessa to hear. "Marcus, you're an angel," she slurred. "I still remember that mess. Lucky you were there to clean up what Arthur left behind, otherwise there'd be nothing for the kids to inherit." Vanessa froze. Clean up Arthur's mess. The phrase cut at the official story she'd been told how Marcus had only stepped in as a friend after Arthur went away, a consoling presence, not the one who cleaned up. She glanced at Marcus. For 1 microsecond, his smile faltered before it slid back into its practiced charm. Too late. She'd seen the crack. After the guests began to drift away, Vanessa went into the sitting room where the wedding gifts were displayed. Center stage, more prominent than anything, sat the memory box. Regal and silent, it rested there. She approached and ran her fingers across the carved oak. 20 years, the carpenter's remark, spoken in that small workshop, no longer felt vague, it rang like an alarm. 20 years. The span since Damien's father was jailed. A chill ran up her spine, though the room was warm. She stared at that flawless object. Now she sensed it contained more than future keepsakes. It held a secret from the past. Somehow, the old carpenter with the sad eyes knew that secret. Somehow, she felt that secret was about to be revealed. In his shop, Arthur stood before an aged mirror, propped against the wall. He studied the reflection. Cropped, salt and pepper hair. The lines around his eyes, each a story. He did not see a failed architect or a convict. He saw a carpenter, and he was ready to go to work. I bet 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past without clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? I didn't enter Exo Chico through the front door. I came in through the service entrance, nodding to the groundskeepers I knew by sight. I no longer belonged to the world of flawless lawns and rehearsed greetings. When I stepped into the reception room, a ripple of whispers passed through the crowd. I stood out in my work clothes, a slab of granite in the manicure garden. I saw Eleanor look at me, a small, contemptuous smile flicker across her lipstick-perfect mouth. Marcus had his hand on Damien's shoulder, whispering something that made my son force a smile. They thought I was a joke. They were half right. I had come to disgrace myself, but not in the way they expected. I sat quietly at a table in the back through the ceremony. I watched Vanessa, beautiful in white, and Damien, handsome and restless in his tuxedo, exchange vows. I wondered if any vows were real. Then came the reception. After the polished speeches and the practiced congratulations, the MC announced it was time for the couple to open gifts. The memory box rested on a small table, a walnut masterpiece glittering under the chandelier. And now, the MC said, a special gift. The bride tells me it was crafted by a local artisan, sort of craftsman. Would you like to say a few words? All eyes swung to me. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged amused looks. The play had begun. I rose slowly and walked to the stage. I didn't look at the crowd. I only looked at the box. I laid my hand on its smooth wood and felt its warmth and honesty. I'm not a man of words, I began, my voice low and clear, carrying across the hushed room. I am a man of matter, of wood. I looked at Vanessa. The bride asked for a box to hold memories, a legacy. But the true legacy does not live in the things we own. It lives in the truth of how we acquire them. My fingers traced the grain. A teacher once told me, wood does not lie. It cannot hide its flaws. Every crack, every knot, every mistake of the craftsman shows itself to anyone who looks. Honesty is its nature. I paused, letting the silence settle. Eleanor's expression tightened. Marcus's brow furrowed. A work like this, I went on, my voice dropping, has a secret, like every family. Then, with slow, deliberate motions, I executed the sequence. My hand moved over the lid as if inspecting my own work. I turned the silver owl a quarter turn to the left. I turned the bear half a turn to the right. I pressed the fox's head down. Click. A small, crisp sound, yet in the quiet of the hall, it rang like a gunshot. The false bottom of the box eased open, revealing a hidden compartment. A ripple of astonished murmurs swept the room. Damien and Vanessa stared, mouths open. I said nothing. I reached into the compartment. First, I placed the small USB on the lid, then the miniature reproductions of the financial papers, and finally, the worn photograph. I did not accuse. I did not explain. I simply set the mute evidence there under the stage lights. I stepped back and said, calmly, a real legacy is the truth. A dense, heavy silence descended. Everyone stared at the small objects on the box, trying to make them mean something. Marcus's panic when he saw the USB was clearer than any confession. He knew exactly what was on it. Eleanor went pale as paper. While the guests stood stunned, Vanessa stepped forward. Her wedding dress whispered across the floor. With trembling hands, she took the photograph. She looked at it, then up, her gaze flicking from Eleanor to Marcus, horror and awakening in her eyes. That look said everything. Marcus broke first. What the hell is this? He roared, voice cracking with panic. This is insane. That old man's gone mad. He raged and denied, but it was too late. The eye of society had seen it all. His panic was confession. The wedding collapsed into a mass of whispers and gasps. Eleanor sat frozen, her perfect mask finally shattering. I didn't stay to watch the rest of it fall apart. My work was done. I went to the table, took my leather ledger off the bench, and set it beside the memory box, a new legacy placed next to a false one. I turned to Damien. He stood caught between a frightened bride and a disintegrating stepmother, his face a tangle of confusion and hurt. In the end, he was the greatest casualty. I looked him in the eye, not with anger, but with a deep sorrow. Now you know the truth, I said quietly. Choose the legacy you want. Life was... Then I stepped down from the stage and left the room. Nobody stopped me. I walked the marble corridors, past the perfectly clipped lawns, and back to my own world. For the first time in 20 years, the past was no longer a weight on my shoulders. I did not walk as a condemned man. I walked as a craftsman who had finished his work. I was free.